Identification of cartridges and bullets. This is one of the most important item in the ballistics which requires identification of bullets and cartridge cases. Bullets are fired from rifled weapons which have lands and grooves. These lands and grooves result in giving characteristic marks, both individual and class characteristic. These marks help in the identification of bullet. The bullet gets imprint of irregularities present in the barrel of the rifled weapons. These irregularities are compared with the questioned bullet of a test bullet using the relevant questioned firearm through a comparison microscope. The comparison microscope compares the striation marks on the bullet which has been fired and called question bullet, along with the comparison to be made with a test bullet when it is fired through the same weapon. Since no two weapons can give exactly similar pattern, these help us to identify the firearm as well as bullet. So far as the cartridge cases are concerned, we must take care that these cartridge cases get certain marks which can be as follows. Pin marks is one of the important factor. When a striker strikes the cap of the cartridge, it imparts it pin marks. Similar marks can be seen while the breech marks. There are in addition ejector marks, there are extractor marks. Some of the marks which are in addition may result from the expansion of the cartridge case. Sometimes the bullet may not have enough marking and may get deformed. In such cases, the identification can be carried out by carrying out elemental analysis of the contents of the bullet, which can be carried out by spectrographic analysis as well as by modern instruments such as neutron activation analysis method or atomic absorption spectrophotometry. These methods are able to detect the elements which are present in the bullet, and the comparison can establish whether the two bullets are similar in nature or two parts of a bullet are similar in nature or otherwise. Thank you.
Dear students, after studying this module, you shall be able to know about the identification of weapons and cartridge case. Along with it, you'll learn about methodology of comparison microscope and comparison of bullets and pellets. Let us start with introduction. In a firearm, when the trigger is pressed, it releases the hammer or the striker with considerable force. Subsequently, the striker compresses a pressure sensitive material boxed inside the percussion cap. This generates a piercing flame which ignites the propellant, producing gas in huge amount. Due to limited space in the cartridge, the large volume of gas so produced develops a high pressure. The pressure so developed forces out the bullet or the shot to move through the barrel. While the bullet moves forward, the cartridge case is pushed backward. Therefore, it comes in contact with the firing pin and the breech face of the breech block and picks up marks at its surface. The cartridge, which also expands all round due to the tremendous pressure developed in it, comes in intimate contact with the chamber and sometimes may carry chamber marks. The empty cartridge case is extracted out of the chamber by an extractor and then ejected out of the gun by an ejector. In this process, both extractor and ejector are likely to leave marks on the cartridge case. All these marks are very useful, which can afford identity of the bullet or the cartridge case with the concerned firearm. Now let us see identification of weapon and cartridge case. Like bullets, cartridge cases can be identified as having been fired by a specific firearm. As soon as cartridges are loaded into a firearm, the potential for the transfer of unique tool marks exists. However, the cartridge does not have to be fired for these marks to be transferred. Simply loading a cartridge into a firearm can cause unique identifiable marks that can be later identified. Cartridge cases, like those on the right, are mostly made of brass but can also be made of other materials such as steel and plastic. Cartridge cases come in a variety of finishes, but all are made of a material that is softer than the materials found in a firearm. Any surface of the cartridge case that meets the inner workings of the firearm may be marked. Tool marks produced on the cartridge cases will be in two basic forms, as the microscopic striations found on bullets. Cartridge cases can pick up striated action marks. These scratches are produced when the cartridge case moves laterally against the tool, producing a scrape or striated mark. The other form of marks that can be left on a cartridge case are impressed action marks. Impressed marks are created on cartridge cases when it impacts the tool with adequate velocity or pressure to leave an impressed or intended mark. Standards are first examined to determine what marks, if any, the firearm is consistently reproducing. Evidence cartridge cases are then directly compared to the standards to see if they too are also similarly marked. A firearm which is manufactured in a factory will bear various marking put by the manufacturer for the purpose of identification, like serial numbers, marker's name, caliber number of lands and grooves, etc. These markings are called as class characteristics. These can be of help in identifying the owner. Besides, there are several other marks which occur on different parts of the firearm, not within the control of the manufacturer. These marks are called accidental marks, which are very helpful in identifying the firearm. Some of the important accidental marks are: number 1, breech block marks. The breech block of a weapon is usually surface finished by a milling tool or file, either of which leaves tiny striation marks on the face of the block. At the moment of firing, the base of the cartridge case strikes with a tremendous force on the breech block, registering impressions on its surface. The marks may occur prominently on the percussion cap, which is made of softer metal than the rest of the surface. Next comes firing pin marks. Because the firing pin strikes the primer cap with force, there will be marks of firing pin on its surface. These marks are due to imperfection, finishing marks, etc. They are different for different firearms and are rarely or never duplicated. Then there are extractor and ejector marks. All firearms have some form of extractor or ejector. The extractor marks are not found on pistol cartridge cases. The pistols have special ejectors which are likely to leave marks on the cartridge cases fired in it. Repeater and automatic arms normally impress definite and recognizable marks like size, shape, and location on the rim of the cartridge case. Sometimes their sliding marks offer more positive identification. The last one would be marks due to expansion. At the time of firing, the cartridge case expands and may take up marks or certain irregularities which may occur in the region where the barrel, the breech block, and the extractor meets. Now, let me shed some light on bullet identification. While a firearm is not usually left at the scene of a crime, a bullet quite often is found at the crime scene. Fortunately, forensics experts do have a number of techniques and tools at their disposal to identify a bullet from a specific firearm. A bullet would carefully be collected to initially compare it to a certain firearm. Then, forensics experts would investigate to see if the bullet coincides with the caliber of the firearm in question. After the bullet would be analyzed to see if the rifling impressions pattern is the same pattern of rifling in the barrel of the firearm being investigated. Assuming the two match up on these aspects, forensic scientists would then attempt to match unique individual characteristics that can transfer from the firearm barrel to the bullet. The transferred characteristics are quite interesting and actually look a bit like a barcode due to the pattern of striations and scratches. They are also visible when viewed through a microscope. Inside the gun barrel, there are imperfections that cause striations on the projectiles. If you picture the bullet moving down through the barrel of the gun, unique striations are left on the bullet due to those imperfections on the surface inside the gun. Forensic scientists can look at these patterns through various forensic science procedures. If police can find a potential weapon used in a crime, forensic experts can then analyze the striations on the bullet which occurred during its passage through the gun. This allows forensic scientists to run test bullets through the gun to compare the resulting marks with the recovered bullets. In cases where the bullets is too mangled to observe striation or no gun is recovered, police would have to employ other strategies for linking up a suspect with a crime. You can likely see how a crime involving gunfire can yield important clues that can be utilized to investigate the crime and possibly catch and convict a criminal. With the rapid rate of research into forensic science areas such as gun identification from recovered bullets, the procedures at the disposal of police and forensic scientists will likely become more sophisticated as well. Bullet fired through rifled firearms receives both the class as well as accidental characteristics of the barrel from which they are fired. The bullet will show not only the primary marking left by the lands and grooves of the gun barrel, but will also reveal the fine striations in all the marks. These are the imprint of the small irregularities in the barrel and are never duplicated by different weapons. To determine whether or not a particular gun has fired the questioned bullet, a detailed comparison is made of marking on the questioned bullet with corresponding marking on the test bullets fired through the suspected gun. A bullet comparison microscope is used for this determination. The suspect bullet and the test fired bullet are illuminated obliquely in order to create shadows that reveal the ridges and furrows engraved by the gun. Now, let me tell you something about comparison microscope in identification. Since the comparison microscope is probably the most important and most widely used scientific instrument in a modern crime laboratory, the first comparison microscope to be used in the field of criminology was a very crude instrument compared to highly developed instruments now available. A comparison microscope consists essentially of two compound microscopes having identical optical systems so that they give the same magnification connected by an optical bridge containing combination of prisms such that by viewing two separate objects through a single eyepiece the two objects may be compared by bringing the images of parts of each into juxtaposition. The optical field seen through the single eyepiece is a circular area divided into two parts by a thin dark line. The object under the left hand microscope, say the evidence bullet, is seen in the left half of this optical field, and the object under the right hand microscope, say a test bullet, is seen only in the right half of the field. Now let us discuss comparison of bullets and pellets. A bullet is the projectile fired from a rifled weapon and is a part of rifle cartridge, whereas pellets are fired from smooth bore weapons, that is 12 bore shotgun. For example, the bullet while passing through the barrel gets the following characteristic of the barrel. Number 1, class characteristic marks of the barrel. Number 2, accidental characteristics marks or individual characteristic marks. Now let us discuss class characteristic marks in detail. You see, number, width, depth, direction, angle, and pitch of lands and grooves on fired bullet indicate class characteristics of a firearm and would be common on bullets fired from firearms of the same make and model, but would be different in respect of different marker and different models. Class characteristics are useful to the extent of quick eliminations only. Now let us see individual characteristics in detail. Finer details in the lands and grooves are called individual characteristics of the firearm. Individual features are as helpful as they are always different, and no two firearms have the same characteristics. Their characteristics are really useful in comparison of bullets. Individual characteristics are the imprint of the small irregularities in the barrel and are never duplicated by different weapons. Now, let us see comparison of question bullet and sample bullet. While question bullet may be found at the scene of crime or removed by doctor from the dead body of the victim, the sample bullet or standard bullet need to be obtained from the recovered weapon. There are various methods for recovery of fired bullets, and one of that is firing the bullet in a water tank and its recovery from the tank. In India, most of the forensic organizations use bullet recovery box for recovering fired bullet. Then comes analysis of damaged bullets. Bullets collected for comparison to a specific firearm are examined first to see if they are of a caliber that could have been fired from the submitted firearm. They are then examined to determine if the pattern of rifling impressions found on the bullet match the pattern of rifling contained in the barrel of the questioned firearm. If these class characteristics agree, the next step is to try to make a positive match between the individual characteristics that may have transferred to the bullet from the barrel. When bullet seized at the crime scene is greatly damaged or when only fragments are recovered, comparatively chemical analysis of the crime bullet and test bullets by spectrographic analysis may yield useful information. Now, let me tell you something about pellets comparison. In the past, it was considered that the identification of pellets fired through a smoothbore weapon is impossible. Some progress has been made wherein some ballistic experts claim that it is possible to identify the fired pellet by comparing makes obtained on a slug when it is pushed through the barrel of a suspect weapon with the marks on side pellets fired from it. Dear student, now let me summarize this chapter for you. In this chapter, I have told that when the trigger of a firearm is pressed, it releases the hammer or the striker with considerable force. The striker compresses a pressure sensitive material contained in the percussion cap. This generates a hot piercing flame which ignites the propellant charge. A firearm which is manufactured in a factory will bear various markings put by the manufacturer for the purpose of identification, like serial number, marker's name, caliber, number of lands and grooves, etc. Along with it, we have also learned that all firearms have some form of extractor or ejector. The extractor marks are not found on pistol cartridge cases. The pistols have special ejectors which are likely to leave marks on cartridge cases fired in it. Then we have learned that the suspect bullet and the test fired bullet are illuminated obliquely in order to create shadows that reveal the ridges and furrows engraved by the gun. And lastly, we have come to know that the number, the width, depth, direction, and pitch of lands and grooves on a fired bullet indicate class characteristics of a firearm and would be common on bullets fired from firearms of the same make and model, but would be different in respect of different maker and different models